Okay, everybody, we are going to get started here in a minute. We are going to be talking about QuickBooks Online again today. It's Marjorie. What we're going to be talking about today is Webstore clearing. This is similar to like a customer deposits type of thing, which we talked about last week, customer deposits, but it's on the other side. It's on the asset side. And this can be used not just for Webstore. The concept of a clearing account can be used in many, many different ways. Work in process, we have for labor allocations, we use it. So the concept of clearing is something that we help clients work on when we're setting up their workflows. So that's why I wanted to do these two close to each other. You don't just have to use this if you have a Webstore. There are other times when you could possibly be using this. As an example, another one that's not a Webstore is when I used to work for that manufacturing company I worked for so many years ago. They used to manually process all of their customer payments that they were taking over the phone, and we would get this lump sum deposit in my bank account, and I had to figure out, what was this deposit for? Well, if I knew about the concept of having a Webstore clearing, or in their case, maybe just a credit card clearing account, then it would have been extremely helpful. Okay. All right. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Just a reminder, as we look at every week, Fourlane is a company that focuses on getting data to make decisions. We want people's books to be accurate and make sure that all of the information and where it's flowing and when it's flowing to the appropriate places is accurate, so that we can make decisions based on data. Okay. In this case today, when we're talking about the Webstore clearing account, what we're saying is that they have a bank deposit that comes in, right? You have a bank deposit that comes into your checking account, and you want to be able to deposit it, right? You want to be able to put it into the bank as fast as possible, because that's how you figure out your cash flow. And what we don't want to be a barrier is, I don't know what this deposit was for. Okay? I don't know why I have this deposit. We don't want that to stop you from making the deposit, because we need that deposit to be made so that when we do cash flow reporting, we have more accuracy, right? So what we want to do instead is we want to create a workflow where deposit can be accepted whenever we need to accept deposit. And then there's an offset to that deposit. And then when we figure out where that deposit is supposed to go, we offset that offset. And that offset is Webstore clearing. Okay, so here's the process we're going to talk through today. Just to give you a quick snapshot, but you guys know I like to function in product the most. So I'm going to dive in there right now. So I am doing this in a sample company file of QuickBooks Online Advanced. This is where I like to function because we have access to the better reporting. We have access to the all of the features that are available in QuickBooks Online. So it's always better to see what's possible than to restrict us by using some of the lower versions. So the first thing that we are going to do is create a Webstore clearing account. Okay. So creating a new account, we can come up here to our gear, click on Chart of Accounts, and select a new account. When it comes to Webstore clearing, generally the workflow is that the deposits from the bank are coming in faster than the details of what that deposit is made up of. Now, we have seen it both ways. If the deposits are coming in first, or if the transaction details are coming in first, it doesn't really matter. Generally, we set this up as an other current asset, okay? Because it's something that you should be receiving in, right? So we look, because we're supposed to be receiving it in, that should be an asset. So when I choose assets here, I save account under, and I'm going to save it under other current assets. The tax form selection, because this is a clearing account, our expectation is that the balance should be 0 most of the time. There might be a couple day offset, right? But it's not something like an investment that's going to be held for a long time or a prepaid expense that's going to be held for a long time. This should be a very short turnaround when it comes to this clearing. So I'm going to call it an other current asset. The account name, we're going to call it Webstore Clearing. But you can call, you know, if you were clearing something else, you can call whatever clearing, and then we can go ahead and say save. Okay. So other current asset, as we talked about in other videos, is something that we expect to receive within a year's time. That makes it a current asset. We don't set this up as like a bank account, although I have seen people set up as a bank account, but you don't have to set up as a bank account to reconcile it. And we don't want it to provide some false numbers around cash, right? So you don't want a fake bank account ever, because cash flow is so important as a business, and you don't want any fake numbers in your cash. Not that this is a fake number, but it should be a clearing, right? So it shouldn't really hold a balance ever. Okay, so we created our new account, and then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about creating a deposit. So when I come into my banking, and in this sample file, I am connected to, all the pop-ups will happen. I am connected to a fake bank in here, right? So when we look at our banking down below, you can see that I have money spent and I have money received. Now this money received right now is going to uncategorized income. What we would do instead is that we would have it go against Webstore clearing. Okay, so instead of going to uncategorized income, we would post that to Webstore clearing. Now in this case, this is a very specific transaction from one person. So, you know, you don't always have to go against Webstore clearing in here. I can apply it to an outstanding invoice. But let's pretend that all transactions that come in that we have processed online on our web store, the deposits for all of that money, whether it's for a singular order or it's for a group of orders that happened the day before, are going to hit Webstore clearing. So here's another one, uncategorized income. Instead of hitting uncategorized income, which is a profit and loss account, right? Uncategorized income hits the profit and loss. And the difference between hitting the profit and loss versus hitting a balance sheet account is that you can reconcile the balance sheet account, like actually reconcile as if it were a bank account. You cannot do that for a profit and loss account. Okay, so that's why it's so important for it to be an other current asset instead of hitting uncategorized income. Okay. So you see I added those couple to Webstore clearing. If you were not connected to your bank and you just were making the deposits because you log into your bank, then you would be coming over here and you would be making a bank deposit. Oops. The account that you're depositing into will be your checking account. That is correct. Okay. And then down below here, from the account where you're posting it against would be Webstore clearing. Right, so I'm going to do one for 5,500, say save, and new. And then I'm going to do a second one from Webstore clearing and make it 2,500, or let's make it 2,800. It's easier to distinguish, and say save and close. Okay. All right, so now that we have those couple of things, I can come into my chart of accounts again, and I can go to my Webstore clearing account, right down here, and I can view the register. Not the prettiest view for what I'm looking for, because basically there's a lot of white space. Right? I just want a little bit of data to be showing. Now I am zoomed in, so we see a lot less on our screen, but you can see here we have the Webstore clearing account, right? Going down, down, decreasing, down, down, down for each one of these transactions. The debit hits cash because cash is coming into our bank. The credit is hitting the Webstore clearing account. Okay. All right. So now what happens? How do we make sure that we have the offset to these accounts? So generally, when it comes to web stores, I'm going to focus on web stores. Generally, when it comes to web stores, we have the transactions come into QuickBooks Online as a sales receipt. Okay, so there are two types of transactions that we talk about a lot in here. So we have invoices and we have sales receipts. The difference between these two is that an invoice is going to hit accounts receivable, and the expectation is that the client is paying you at a future date. You have to keep track. You put an invoice in the system so you can keep track of when the customer is supposed to pay you in the future. Now, all of us who buy on Amazon every day know, right? When you buy on a web store, you are paying at the point of sale. You are paying at the time you are processing that sale. So there is not a need to track for a future. Okay. Sales receipts do not hit accounts receivable. They hit directly to a cash account or another current asset account. They can hit directly to there. Okay. They bypass accounts receivable. And then invoice, if you think about it, an invoice, we put an invoice in, hits accounts receivable, and then when the customer pays us, that's a separate transaction, customer payment, right? In this case, sales receipt does both of those things. It accounts for the income, the revenue, and it takes the payment at the same time instead of that being two separate transactions. So I'm going to enter a sales receipt, and we can choose the customer. And I come down below here, and I'm going to say we have, design, and we did $2,000 in design, and say save and new. And then I'm going to do another customer, cool cars, and we did some concrete work. Oh, you know what? I just messed up already. I'm going to go back and find it. We did some concrete work for $800. And what I forgot to do there is right now it's depositing to undeposited funds, which is not where my clearing is happening, right? I want to go to Webstore clearing. Okay. And the reason for this is undeposited funds cannot be reconciled and Webstore clearing can be reconciled. So save. Okay. I can pull up my recent sales receipts up here. So the other $2,000 one I did, and I can correct it to point it towards Webstore clearing. And say save. So I did that by clicking on this little kind of like go back in time button. Okay, so we entered two sales receipts, and now those sales receipts are in the system. When we come back into our register here, you can see that our register ending balance is now less negative by that $2,800. It's increasing by the $2,800. So when we look at the debits and credits on a sales receipt, right? When we come down here to more and we look at our transaction journal, you can see that what happens is that Webstore clearing is debited now, and the income account is credited, right? Because income has a natural credit balance. So bank deposit, when we do the bank deposit, bank gets debited, Webstore clearing gets credited. Then when we have this sales receipt go in, Webstore clearing gets debited. So this is the offset. Okay, this is the offset. All right, now the fun part, right? So you can see in there, I had a negative balance. That's not fun to have a negative balance sitting in any account. And so how do we manage that balance? How do we know, like, what have we received a deposit for and what have we not received a deposit for? What have we created the sales transaction for and what have we not created the sales transaction for? And we can go in and start to do that through the Webstore clearing reconciliation. So first I'm going to create a report though, because it's always important to start with reports. So if we go into our report section, reports should tell us what we can reconcile. If we go into our report section here, oh, I saw a question pop up and I just wanted to make sure that I was answering and it's not letting me click on there. There we go. Okay. If we go to the report section, we say create a new report. Now you can create it from blank. I like creating things from blank, but I'm going to do it this week based off a transaction list, right? Because that's what we're going after. We want to see all transactions that have hit the Webstore clearing account. So I'm going to click on this and say create. Now when you choose transaction list, it fills in for you some columns automatically. Okay. Now some of these columns I don't need. So I'm going to click customize. So I'm sorry, first, let me edit the report and call it Webstore Clearing Report so that I have my report saved. I'm also going to edit the time frame. The time frame is going to be this fiscal year. Okay, and you have to be aware of time frame, of course, because if it's January 1st and you say this fiscal year, then maybe you're missing some stuff in here. So I say this fiscal year, and then I can click on customize over here. The columns that I want to have, I do not need transaction type, but it's useful information, so I'm going to leave it there. I do want to leave transaction date because I'm going to group my items by transaction date because I think it'll be helpful in reconciliation. I don't really need transaction number because I really don't care, so I'm going to get rid of that. So if I type in here, transaction, no, oops, if I can spell correctly, number, you can see all of the different areas down below here that do have transaction number somewhere in there, and I can see the quantity of one next to the one that is on my report already. Okay, so because I see quantity 1, I know that's the one. If I look under inventory here, I have a transaction number under the inventory bucket on my report. But because this one has a 1 on it, I know that that's the one that's showing. So I can uncheck it to take it off of my report. We want to have posting status, doesn't really matter because all of the transactions I'm going to be working with are posted, but I'm going to leave it on there just in case. I don't need created date because I really don't care about it. So if I type in created, you can see I see the 1 under transaction. I can uncheck it. I don't need last modified date. When I create a report, the first thing that I do is I go in and I remove what's not needed in customize. Even though they have pivot table group filter, you really want to move right to left. Start with customize, then filter, then group. So I go to customize here, and I remove the columns I don't need and then add in the columns I do need. So I do want to add in cleared because eventually what I want to do with this report is I want to filter it for only things that are cleared. And we want the transaction line to be cleared. Okay, so we'll look at what does cleared mean in a minute. But in order to filter it, it has to be one of the columns on here, okay? So cleared, I want to put in the amount line, transaction line amount, not the transaction amount, which is showing here. So I can actually uncheck that. But I don't want the whole transaction. What if I had multiple lines on my transaction, right? I want the transaction line amount. And then I want to add in the account because again, oops, I didn't spell that right. If I want to filter by a certain account, it has to be on the report. Okay, so I want to filter by the transaction line account. If I do not add that to the field, I can filter it down to only show me Webstore clearing. Okay. So now I have added all of the lines that I need to on my report, and you can see I can scroll over here. If I needed to, I could widen things, right? Move and widen things here. On the layout, I can drag and drop if I wanted, you know, transaction date to show up top. I can drag it up there so it can show up in the beginning. Now, I like to save my reports as I go, especially because if I walk away or anything and I lose access, and I like to save as I go while I'm building reports. I also like to, if I'm building different iterations of reports, because I'm not sure which one has the right data, I will say Webstore clearing 1, Webstore clearing 2, and then just clear out that report that I end up not using. Okay. All right, so we're done with customize, I think. Hopefully we're done with customize. Sometimes I have to go back in there and do it again. But we're going to go to filter. And now I'm going to filter for account equals and choose Webstore clearing, right? Because I only want to focus on this report on the Webstore clearing account. Now all I see on this report is what we did Webstore clearing wise. Right? Then the other thing that I want to filter for, which is always great when you're doing a clearing account, is you always want to add a filter for cleared equals uncleared. Because what we're saying by doing that is we're saying, if I clear this transaction, I don't need to see it on my report anymore. If I clear it, I don't need to see it anymore. Okay, because all I want to focus on when I have to run this Webstore clearing account, I want to focus on what hasn't cleared, because I need to figure out why. Right? I need to figure out if I received a deposit for $5,500 and I only have sales receipts that add up to $5,000. What is that extra $500? I mean, great, I'll take an extra $500. But what is it? Why do I have it? Or what is most commonly the case, I have a deposit for $5,500 and my sales receipts add up to $6,000. Where's my other $500? What happened? Okay. All right, so I have my filter set up here. Now I do like to, and it's best practice to figure out a way you can group these. So for today's purpose, I'm going to group them by transaction date. Okay. And I'm going to book them by actual date. See how when you choose transaction date, you can say bucket them by year, bucket them by quarter, bucket them by week. But I'm going to do it by actual date, just so that we can see what that looks like. And then save. Never forget to save. Okay, so I have my report, and it shows me basically what the register was showing me, right? I have all of these things on here. And what my goal is to do is to get them off of here. I don't want them to be on my report anymore. So you can see on this day, on 5/11, of what we did already, I have a negative 2,800, I have a positive 2,000, and a positive 800. Now my assumption is going to be, because usually you don't, maybe on Monday you'll get a deposit for like Saturday and Friday, but usually you don't have two deposits on the same day when it comes to Webstore clearing. But we have 2,800. So I want to go through and reconcile these and then get them off of my report. So we go in to our little gear here, and we go to Reconcile. And when I say get started, it gives me all the tips and tricks. I am going to reconcile my Webstore clearing account. Anytime you reconcile a clearing account, you are not reconciling to the ending balance on your balance sheet. We see that issue a lot. What you are reconciling to is 0. Okay, and you can reconcile this Webstore clearing account daily if you want to, weekly, monthly, however often you need to. If you have a high volume of transactions flowing through your books, my suggestion would be to do it daily or weekly. Do not wait till the end of the month, because when it is 1,000 lines long, it is going to be a daunting task. So it's easier to knock out little chunks than to knock out 1,000 lines, right? So I say 0, and then I start reconciling. Now, once we have it pulled up in here, a lot of times I will keep that report that we had on a separate screen. I remember the numbers that we're looking for here, but I'll keep it on a separate screen so that I can see, right? I expected the 2,800 and I expected to check off these guys and have them reconcile against each other. So once I have those 3 checked off, I have a difference of 0, and then I can say finish now. Now when I go back to my reports and I have my custom reports, I go to my Webstore clearing report, I am left with only what is not reconciled, right? Only what is not reconciled is left on my report. So now my job is to go figure out who paid us, who paid us this money, so I can get those sales receipts entered. Hopefully you guys can see, I know I did 2 kind of clearing accounts 2 weeks in a row, but I really wanted to dig in there so that you can see how they can be beneficial. The purpose of the Webstore clearing, again, is to make sure that your cash flow is not prohibited while you're waiting on data, while you're waiting, right? So our cash flow is updated. Our cash is updated in here, which means our cash flow reporting can be updated. And we can figure out after what transactions generated this cash flow. Okay. Now, you don't want to wait too far after. You don't want to wait like a couple months. You want to do it within a couple days probably, but hopefully you see that as helpful. All right, coming back into our slide deck here, just a reminder of what we're going to be doing next week and ongoing. Oh, I still have Webstore clearing on here. We're going to be doing bank reconciliations, tips and tricks, some troubleshooting, how to connect to a bank, all things accounts receivable. I will hang out here for a minute to see if anybody has any questions, and if not, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.